It was supposed to be an ordinary royal appearance, another carefully managed event in a monarchy built on tradition. But the moment Catherine stepped into view, seasoned royal watchers froze. Around her was a jewel so closely tied to Princess Diana that many believed it would never be worn again. Within hours, palace phones were ringing, aides were scrambling, and one unexpected reaction stood above all others. King Charles said absolutely nothing. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the palace tried to treat it as routine. Another elegant choice from a princess who had learned the language of monarchy through silence, discipline, and restraint. But this was not routine. This was Diana's shadow returning through a single protected jewel, and everyone who understood royal symbolism knew it. Photographers noticed before commentators did. Editors began comparing old archives. Insiders reportedly whispered that this particular piece had not been placed before Catherine lightly. Not without approval, not without purpose, and certainly not without risk. Because Diana's jewels were never just jewels. They carried grief, memory, public devotion, and wounds the royal family had spent decades trying to cover with protocol. Catherine did not speak. William did not explain. The palace did not rush forward with a clarification. And Charles, whose silence has often been interpreted as caution, grief, or discomfort, became the center of the storm by saying nothing at all. That silence made the moment feel heavier, as if the monarchy had allowed the past to walk back into the present without warning. Supporters called it a tribute. Critics called it a message. But behind the polished calm, one question spread fast. Who allowed Catherine to wear it now after all this time? But the real mystery wasn't why Catherine wore the jewel, it was why this particular piece had been protected for so long, and who had quietly ensured it remained hidden. Long before Catherine ever wore it, the jewel had already become something larger than a royal accessory. It represented memory, heartbreak, and a chapter of royal history that still carried enormous emotional weight. For decades, it existed almost like a sacred relic admired, remembered, but rarely touched. In royal language, some jewels decorate, but others accuse. This one carried Diana's name with a force no palace statement could soften. Every time it was remembered, it reopened the same old questions about love, loss, duty, and the price paid by a woman who became more powerful in public memory than many inside the palace ever expected. That is why its protection mattered. Reports suggested access to it was never casual, never handled like an ordinary item from the royal collection. It was linked to inheritance, emotion, and the fragile line between honoring Diana and exploiting her memory. For William, that line was deeply personal. For Catherine, it was dangerous territory. To wear something so closely tied to Diana was not simply to borrow beauty. It was to step into a legacy full of devotion, judgment, and impossible comparison. And yet that was exactly what made the moment so explosive. The public had never stopped searching for Diana in the monarchy's future. They saw fragments of her in William's restraint, in Catherine's calm, in the quiet dignity expected from the next generation. The jewel became the bridge between what had been lost and what the crown was trying to preserve. But behind that emotional pull was a colder question of authority. Who controlled Diana's most guarded pieces? Was it tradition, inheritance, the king, William, or an unseen palace understanding that had survived for years without being spoken aloud? The more the jewel's past was discussed, the more its reappearance felt intentional, almost like a sealed chapter had been opened. At the exact moment, the monarchy was shifting from Charles's fragile reign toward William and Catherine's future. As historians revisited the jewel's past, attention began shifting toward a much more sensitive question: how exactly had Catherine gained access to something so heavily protected? Behind the grandeur of royal appearances lies a world of approvals, consultations, and unwritten rules. Nothing of this magnitude happens by accident, which is why insiders immediately began searching for the hidden decision that had cleared the path for Catherine to wear the jewel. Because in the royal household, jewelry is never chosen like a simple personal preference. It passes through memory, protocol, ownership, permission, and consequence. A brooch, necklace, ring, or tiara can carry more political weight than a speech, and Diana's most protected pieces carry a burden almost no one dares to mishandle. That is why Catherine's appearance felt so charged. Reports suggested the discussion had begun long before the public saw anything, quietly moving through the kind of private channels, where every possible reaction is measured before a single step is taken. William's role quickly became the focus, not because he needed to announce himself, but because Diana's legacy flows through him in a way no courtier can ignore. If Catherine wore the jewel, many believed William had either supported it, approved it, or understood exactly what message it would send, and that possibility made the palace uneasy. Senior figures may have been consulted, advisors may have warned about comparisons, and communications teams may have prepared for the storm that would follow. But still, the decision went forward. That alone suggested it was deliberate, not a romantic accident, not a careless tribute, a calculated act of continuity. The timing made it even more powerful. With Charles's reign shadowed by illness and public attention increasingly fixed on the Waleses, Catherine's choice seemed to place Diana's memory directly beside the monarchy's future. It was graceful, but it was also bold. It honored the past while quietly asking who now had the right to carry it. And as whispers moved from jewelry vaults to media rooms, one truth became harder to deny. The protected jewel had not merely been released, it had been entrusted. Yet, as attention turned toward those who approved the move, another question emerged: why did the public reaction become so emotional almost overnight? For millions watching around the world, the jewel was more than a royal heirloom. The moment Catherine appeared wearing it, memories came flooding back. Suddenly, conversations were no longer about gemstones or protocol. They were about Diana, legacy, and the future of the monarchy itself. That was the force of it. One protected piece of jewelry had reopened an emotional chamber the palace could never fully seal. Social media food first, as it always does now, with side-by-side comparisons, old Diana memories, and emotional reactions from people who had followed the royal family for decades. But beneath the praise was something deeper than nostalgia. People were not simply remembering Diana. They were asking whether Catherine had now become the safest guardian of what Diana left behind. Commentators debated whether it was a tribute, a coincidence, or a quiet declaration from the Wales household. Yet the public seemed to answer before the palace ever did. To many supporters, Catherine had not taken from Diana's legacy, she had protected it with restraint. She wore it without spectacle, without explanation, without turning memory into performance. And that restraint made the moment even more powerful. Diana's story had always been filled with contradiction. Adored by the public, wounded by the institution, impossible to forget. Catherine's role, by contrast, had been built on endurance, patience, and careful loyalty. That contrast made the jewel feel like a bridge across two eras, one marked by heartbreak, the other by quiet restoration. Media coverage quickly expanded beyond the event itself. The discussion became about inheritance, symbolism, and whether the monarchy was now allowing Diana's memory to return through William's family, rather than through official speeches. Every headline made the silence around the palace louder. Every public reaction made the moment harder to dismiss. And as the emotional wave grew, insiders reportedly understood that something had changed. Catherine had not merely worn a jewel, she had touched one of the monarchy's most sensitive nerves. But while the public focused on memories and symbolism, insiders were paying attention to something far more, revealing the complete absence of any response from the king. In royal circles, silence can speak louder than any statement. And as headlines spread across newspapers and television screens, observers noticed something impossible to ignore. King Charles, normally careful about symbolism and royal messaging, remained entirely silent. At first, some believed it was simply caution, the old palace method of refusing to feed a story until it collapsed under its own noise. But this story did not collapse. It grew sharper. It gathered emotion. It turned a single jewel into a national conversation about Diana, Catherine, and the future of the crown. Palace communications avoided naming the piece directly, and that careful avoidance only deepened the mystery. No warm tribute appeared. No formal clarification arrived. No gentle explanation was offered to calm the questions. Instead, royal correspondents began reading the silence like a coded message, searching for what Charles could not or would not say. Some interpreted it as personal pain, because Diana's memory still carries a history no monarch can easily escape. Others saw it as political caution, a refusal to step into a comparison between the past Princess of Wales and the present one. But the most dramatic interpretation was this: Charles stayed silent because Catherine's moment had moved beyond his control. The jewel had crossed from private inheritance into public meaning, and once the public embraced it, the palace could not pull it back without seeming cold. That was the trap. If Charles praised it, he confirmed Catherine as the new keeper of Diana's emotional legacy. If he questioned it, he risked appearing to reject the very memory the nation still protects. So he remained silent, and in that silence, the monarchy seemed to reveal its deepest tension. Charles represented the painful history. William represented the bloodline. Catherine represented the future that could carry Diana's memory without reopening every wound. And as the fascination intensified, it became clear that the king's silence was no longer an absence. It had become the loudest signal of all. The longer the silence lasted, the more people wondered whether this moment was about far more than jewelry. It may have signaled a changing balance inside the royal family. What began as a single appearance was now being interpreted as a statement about the future. Not because anyone had spoken publicly, but because symbols often carry more power than words. And few symbols in royal history are as powerful as those connected to Diana. The jewel had become a signal, and the signal pointed directly toward William and Catherine. For years, they had been seen as the steady pair waiting in the wings, careful not to overshadow the king, cautious not to appear impatient, disciplined enough to let time do its quiet work. But this moment changed the temperature. Suddenly, Catherine was not just admired as a graceful royal figure. She was being viewed as a future queen carrying one of the most delicate emotional inheritances in modern monarchy. Diana's memory remained central to public affection because it belonged to grief, hope, and unfinished history. And now, through Catherine, that memory seemed to have found a new place inside the royal future. William's presence in the background of the story made it even more powerful because the jewel's meaning flowed through him by blood and through Catherine by duty. Together, they appeared to represent continuity without confrontation, a softer transfer of emotional authority from one generation to the next. Palace observers reportedly noticed the shift almost immediately. The conversation was no longer only about what Catherine wore. It was about what she had become: a guardian, a bridge, a woman trusted with symbols that could either heal old wounds or reopen them. That is why the timing mattered so much. With Charles's reign marked by strain and uncertainty, the public's gaze was already moving toward the Wales family. The jewel simply made that movement visible. It gave people something they could understand without needing palace language. Diana's past, Catherine's present, William's future, all bound together in one fragile symbol. But with that symbolism came pressure. Because once Catherine was seen as the keeper of Diana's legacy, every future choice would carry deeper meaning. Every jewel, every tribute, every silence would be measured against this moment. And behind the admiration was a warning the palace could not ignore. Legacy is never handed over without tension. Yet the story was still not complete, because hidden beneath the headlines was a deeper battle involving memory, legacy, and who ultimately becomes the guardian of Diana's place in history. Royal jewels may sparkle in public, but their true value often lies in what they represent. Titles can change, roles can evolve, but legacy endures. And in this case, one extraordinary jewel appeared to reopen questions that the monarchy had spent years trying to settle. Because Diana's influence did not fade with time, it changed shape. It moved from headlines into memory, from sorrow into symbolism, from scandal into something almost untouchable. Every generation of the royal family had to decide how close it dared to stand to that memory. Too distant, and the palace looked cold. Too close, and the old wounds began to bleed again. Catherine's appearance forced that dilemma back into the open. She was increasingly seen as stability after years of turbulence, as continuity after heartbreak, as the figure who could carry royal tradition without making it feel hard or unreachable. That is why the debate intensified so quickly. Some argued the jewel was a rightful tribute, a graceful sign that Diana's place in history had finally been embraced rather than quietly managed. Others believed it was far more calculated, a carefully timed act that placed Catherine at the heart of Diana's emotional inheritance. Historians and commentators began revisiting royal inheritance traditions, reminding audiences that jewels inside the monarchy have always carried messages about rank, trust, and succession. They are not only passed from hand to hand, they are passed from era to era. And this time, the transfer felt deeply personal. The jewel seemed to say that the monarchy was moving forward, but not by erasing Diana. It was moving forward by allowing her memory to stand beside Catherine's future role. That made the moment both beautiful and dangerous. Beautiful because it gave the public a sense of healing. Dangerous because it raised the question of authority. Who decides how Diana is remembered, and who has the right to wear that memory before the world? As public debate grew louder, the jewel became less about diamonds, pearls, or craftsmanship, and more about generational transition. Charles had inherited the throne. William would inherit the future. Catherine, through one guarded symbol, appeared to inherit the emotional bridge between them. And as discussions reached their peak, one final realization emerged. The moment was never really about the jewel itself. The jewel may have captured headlines, but its true significance lay elsewhere. It represented memory without words, continuity without announcements, and a future that seemed to reveal itself through symbolism rather than decree. That is why the moment resonated so deeply, and why Charles's silence became impossible to forget. By the end of the controversy, it was clear that Catherine had not simply worn a treasured royal piece. She had stepped into a role that felt larger than fashion, larger than ceremony, and larger than one carefully managed appearance. The jewel became a quiet declaration that Diana's legacy had not been locked. It had survived. It had waited. And now, through Catherine, it seemed to return with dignity instead of drama. That was why the public response refused to fade. People saw continuity where the palace offered no explanation. They saw William's future reflected through Catherine's restraint. They saw Diana's memory woven into the monarchy's next chapter, not as an open wound, but as a powerful reminder of what the crown had endured and what it still had to protect. Charles' silence remained open to interpretation, perhaps grief, perhaps caution, perhaps the painful awareness that some symbols no longer belonged fully to him. But whatever the reason, that silence gave the moment its final force. It allowed the jewel to speak on its own. It allowed Catherine's position to appear stronger without a single official announcement, and it left the monarchy facing a truth it could not easily deny. The future was no longer waiting quietly in the background. It was already taking shape, one symbol at a time. The fascination showed no sign of fading because this was not merely about one appearance or one inherited treasure. It was about who gets to carry memory, who earns public trust, and who becomes the living bridge between heartbreak and stability. Catherine's role had been strengthened not through speeches, but through restraint. Diana's legacy had been honored not through spectacle, but through silence. And Charles, by saying nothing, had made the entire moment feel even more historic. Because in the House of Windsor, the most powerful messages are rarely spoken aloud, and sometimes a single jewel can say more than an entire palace ever could. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.